Buenos días. Yo soy Andrés Ditela, director del programa de cine de la Universidad Ditela, y hoy tenemos el placer y el honor de contar con uno de los cineastas para mí más originales y estimulantes del panorama contemporáneo, que es el rumano Radu Jude, que estoy seguro si están acá en esta conferencia no necesita demasiada introducción. Hace un par de años vimos acá en la universidad la película Sexo Desafortunado o Porno Loco, y también hemos visto Me es indiferente si quedamos en la historia como bárbaros, estos títulos fascinantes, los mejores títulos del mundo. Y la última que está actualmente, estuvo en cartelera en Buenos Aires varios meses y está en la plataforma Movie, que se llama No esperes demasiado del fin del mundo. Y la conversación de hoy va a centrarse un poco sobre la experiencia de Radu haciendo esa película. Estamos esperando hoy la presencia con nosotros de Roger Cosa, el crítico y programador, que creo que ha tenido un inconveniente. Así que estoy llenando su lugar. Acá está Radu. Eh, y quería decirles que pueden poner preguntas en el chat. Abajo hay un icono que dice chat, pueden escribir preguntas y las iremos recopilando y transmitiéndolas a Radu a medida que avance esta charla, que en principio tendrá más o menos una hora y media de duración. Bueno, ahora va a ser todo en inglés, aclaro, salvo esta primera parte. So, Radu, so very pleased to see you here. Thank you
Thank you
very much.
for the invitation, and I'm saluting the participants. I don't see anyone. I only see Andres, so that makes it a little bit easier. It's like talking just with one person and not with many people. So.
Okay, so maybe we can just start with the obvious question that is always interesting to me, is how this project for Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World uh, came about. Maybe you don't remember because you're already about to make another film. So
I remember very well because it's something important and because it's how should I say I'm always pay attention to this to how ideas come um, because um, because I think one of the things that is extremely important for a filmmaker compared with other arts is that a filmmaker is always searching for, well, what we call inspiration subjects. Here appears the language to be Spanish. Should I change to English, or do you have
I don't think it matters very
matters?
much.
Okay, okay. I saw that you might have automatic translation or something. Okay. So I'm thinking that the question is very good and much more important than for an actual film or not, because as a filmmaker you need ideas. Well, I mean, now it depends how you work, because if you work in Hollywood or if you work for television, then maybe it's a little bit another type of economy and ecology of production. But otherwise, if you're what is called, I don't know, all other types of making films, it's based on you as a filmmaker having an idea, finding I don't know, a subject, a theme, a story, a script, a book, whatever. Yeah, so I think that's why they are very important. And to go on a little bit with this digression, I'm thinking more and more, maybe a little bit like you, I think, judging from what I know about your last films, which I haven't seen, the last one, is the fact that one of the important thing is somehow to be always working, not to be I think the model of cinema that is usually made in film schools, not in yours, but in film schools is, and then in what is called film industry, is that you make a film. I mean, you write or you have a project, you make a film, then for 2 years or 3 years, you don't consider to do any work. Then you have another project, then again and again like that. And if you study other type of artists, musicians, or painters, or writers or poets, they don't think like that. A poet or a painter doesn't say, okay, now for 1 week I paint something, a painting, and then I stay half a year and then I paint another one. Or I don't know, a painter is usually painting every day, sometimes one painting, sometimes he or she works on many paintings. So I have a little bit, I tried to have for myself in my own way, because it's always a question of how you can organize your life, also in your personal life, your private life, your professional life, the economic life around you. But more and more I try to not to be dependent, so to speak, on inspiration, not to be dependent on the magic moment, as people would say. So I'm basically always working on something, meaning by that I either got when I have an idea. I mean, if you're open, if you work and if you practice, of course, more idea come to you. That's also what Godard said in a few interviews, that ideas come from practice. Ideas don't come just like that. And I think that's a very important thing and a very important idea, because it's true. For instance, because I'm not a specialist and I'm not interested, I'm not working in atomic physics or in mathematics or in chemistry. I never had an idea about atomic physics. It would be impossible. When people say, oh, I just stayed at home and the inspiration came, I said, well, it's impossible. The inspiration comes, like Godard says, if you work on something, if you're always open, if you're always searching in an active way. So I'm basically, I'm always trying to, you see, someone is asking if we have translation in Spanish. So I don't know. I don't hear you.
Ya, no, estaba aclarado que es en inglés, desgraciadamente no tenemos traducción. I'm just
Sorry.
saying we don't have
I
translation.
apologize. Yeah, so I was thinking that whenever an idea or a direction appears, I try to gather materials, I try to develop it in different ways. I try to find ways to prepare it, and little by little, this idea grows. And in this case, to get back finally to your question, I think it was first of all, and I try to be honest and to express it in from all perspective, because I think at some point was first of all a personal recollection, and I will get immediately very shortly about it, plus a desire to speak about it, and then economic desire, the fact that I was basically that didn't have any money, or I realized I might have some problems in the future with financing. So when the occasion appeared in our film center to apply with something, I very fast, like in 3 weeks, wrote a script and apply with it, and I was rejected. But it was somehow there. So the personal recollection is about the fact that I started in cinema in a different way maybe than others. I was rejected by the National Film School many times, and then I started a kind of TV school, not very good at all, but this school was connected with a studio television, but they started at the end of the 90s to do production for foreign film studios, meaning by that Americans or British or French would come to Romania because everything was cheaper, workforce, people, locations, and I could find a job in this way in cinema. I wanted to work in cinema, so little better I could find. It was easy to get in because they needed people, young people, to work. You know, young people are always good because they are cheap. You see, it's and yeah. So I started like that, and that was in a way a marvelous thing. For 5 or 6 years, I've done all kinds of jobs. But was also, now looking back on it, a time of heavy exploitation, because of course there were laws about work, but nobody respected them. In a way which is, I'm not so dogmatic about it, because I think cinema is a nice, sometimes an interesting place, because it is a bit out of regulations. You cannot regulate a film shoot exactly like an office work, let's say, or it's a little bit more difficult to do it. But apart from this kind of romantic view about the work in cinema, it's also, and it was a time where I could see, when I look back, how dangerous it was in many ways, and I know that many people died either in car crashes because they had to drive after many hours of work, or they got very sick, and this goes on. Just like 1 year ago, we had a camera assistant that worked 24 hours for a commercial, then another 24 hours, and he had a heart attack and he died. He was a young, he was less than my age, with 3 or 4 kids at home. So it's obvious that when you work 48 hours, it's and it happens. It still happens. So I see more and more not the romantic part, but more the exploitation part. And when I look back at these experiences, I realized not only that maybe they would be interesting to tell it for a film, but also that in a way they encapsulate a little bit the new economic realities, because maybe Romania was a communist dictatorship until 1989, and then in a few years it became a capitalist economy, privatizing everything, almost everything that was nationalized, sometimes with good results, sometimes with terrible results, sometimes with mixed results. So it's still even 35 years after the revolution, is still a new thing. It's a new economy for us. It's a new thing. I mean, we were so naive, like 25 years ago, people would say, when we will have everything privatized, things will be perfect. Really, we believe that, because they said, oh, it's still the remains of communist mentalities that doesn't let us. And now, of course, we understand in the last years, with a kind of a shock, that I'm not against the free market. I'm not against capitalism in itself, but I think it should be regulated. I think it should be laws to stop exploitation. So I really think there's a lot of other aspects that we cannot see it in such a naive way. So this is why these stories that are in the film, I felt that they are, how should I say, they are important. So this is how the idea came. When I said that, well, I have these experiences. Usually, now I make another side thing. I don't care very much about personal stories, as they call it. Not because I don't believe that cinema could or should be personal, but I think it could and should be personal in many ways. Usually, I think these mantras that came from creative workshops, creative writing workshops, and then from cinema screenwriting workshops, like write about yourself, write about your own experiences. I think this is very good, but it shouldn't become like a mandatory thing, because then what happens is I'm also teaching cinema in Cluj University, and there are always in each year 12 students in 1 year plus 12 in another. So basically, I have always like 20 people. If they come, sometimes come only 10 or 15, I don't know. But from these 20, when they have to make films every semester, and all the scripts are the same, and it's about my experience. They say, this is my experience in the holidays, this is my experience with my grandma, my experience with my lover, etc. And all of them are become more or less the same. So I think a camera is first of all a tool that you can look outside. Okay, but in this case, I felt that this story could become the starting point for this film. So maybe I stop here because I already spoke too much. Yeah.
Actually, there's a couple of questions that relate to what you started out with, and I myself would want to ask you more about this method in a way. Here's Mata Matayoshi, who is a great photographer. He asks the daily practice that you mentioned, like the painter, the daily practice in cinema. How does it come about? Does it come about writing every day, shooting every day, looking every day? How do you practice cinema work daily?
Oh, that's of course a very good question, and coming from a photographer, I think from a photographer is more it's a little bit more clear what the photographer has to do is to make photos every day, while a filmmaker normally doesn't have to film every day. But I think of course, first of all, that a film means a little bit more stages. Is you're in a stage of, as I said, searching for materials, for ideas, and gathering materials. And I think this is a very important stage for any project you have. That even me, although I know it, I think it's considered by most of us the most annoying, because you say I have an idea and I don't want to do a research on it. Even if you say like I want to make a film about dreams or whatever, I really think it's important to make research, because everything could be better, or you can find new angles. And whenever I did more research, my projects were better, a little bit, or sometimes even in a crucial way. I will give later some examples about that. So I think, but it's also another, that's one thing, to make a proper research on whatever you want to explore. And also then to make, I really believe, and maybe in a discussion in one of the next days, I really believe that cinema is not so much about creating something in the moment, or creating something, not even like a photographer, but it means to connect things. You connect in theater also, but in cinema even more, because what is the director is, you connect a camera with actors, or with objects, or with light, and then you connect the images together. You connect them with sounds, with music, with words, with all these things. So you really have to have something to connect. And one of the highlights of my last years was, I was invited by the French distributor to host a Q&A with Frederick Weissman, who's in Paris, who's maybe arguably the biggest American filmmaker of today. He's 94. but also very the greatest documentarian for sure. He's doing, if there's someone who didn't see, like 50 films, most of them very long, 3, 4, 5 hours, about institutions. All his work is about American institutions. And I was very impressed because, well, I'm really proud. I think I was able to do it well, because I asked him, Mr. Weissman, what is your influence? And he said, well, literature, history, philosophy, novels, and no cinema. And I said, why? Why why is that? Why do you think literature or philosophy or history is more important than image arts, you know? And he says something that I really think he's completely right. In a very simple words, he says, because the problem for people who are creating images or seeing images and interpreting images is that image is something concrete. It has a kind of concreteness in front of you. You have something happening in front of the camera, either if you stage it or if it's documentary, it doesn't matter from this point of view. But what does it mean in an abstract way? You have to see both the concrete part of the image, of what the image shows, but also what is the abstraction of it. What does it mean? The meaning of it. So from this point of view, Weissman said literature or history or essays help you much more to think in abstract ways than just seeing images all the time. Yeah, so I somehow keep this in mind. So there's one thing, what I said before, to get back to the question, is the way you gather materials. It can be specific on a project, but also in a more general way. You never know where you would find something. I'm not saying to read a book or listen to music with an obsessive idea ear, like what do I find here for my project. I'm not saying that, but if you don't have something to connect, then you cannot make connections. I think that's obvious, and that's also that neurologists say. I just read an interview recently with a neurologist who says that actually you become what you do in a repetitive way, what you're doing every day. If you don't do something, I mean, if you're, I don't know, watching TV every day, your brain will get used to that. If you do sports every day, your brain. So so it's important in a way to practice cinema every day. So now to get back, it's either if you make a preparation, or if you gather materials, or if you watch films, or if you read books, or if you make a photo to make. But all this, and I think this is the most crucial thing, and that's not easy to get, but not impossible. I don't pretend I have it. I'm just saying that it's not easy, but I don't think it's impossible. Is to be able to see everything that you do with the eyes of a filmmaker. Meaning by that, for instance, that there is this anecdote. I think I gave it before, but I'm sorry to repeat myself, but I really think it's very important, about Eisenstein, the great Soviet filmmaker. And Naum Kleiman, who's the biggest specialist in Eisenstein, says that, well, Eisenstein was someone that was enormously cultivated. He knew music perfectly. He was an architect and an engineer originally, before becoming filmmaker. He knew mathematics. He read in 4 languages. He knew philosophy, literature, painting. He was a collector of books and graphic drawings, etc. So he was extremely cultivated. But he says, what Naum Kleiman says is that the bookshelves of Eisenstein was organized on montage principles, meaning by that, they were not like on domain like literature, philosophy, history, or chronologically, but on oppositions. Like, for instance, Napoleon book, a book about Napoleon, was next to to book about anomalies in biology or something like that. So, and he had thousands of books, and all of them were put like that. Meaning by that, I'm giving this example to understand that even when you put your books in your bookshelves, could be a cinema thinking. So cinema is a way to think of things. It's not only when you make the films, it's also how you look at things, how you find peculiar, how you see, I don't know, the trees moving in the tree, as Griffith said. That's part of cinema for me, more and more. How you see an image in the reflection of a window, how you hear people talking, how you see people being dressed, how you see the clouds in the sky. All these things are cinema, I think, in a way. This is why I have more and more difficulties to say when people say, "Oh, tell me the films, the greatest films that you saw in the last year," or something like that. Of course, I like some things much more than the other, and I still make hierarchies. Of course, it's impossible not to. But on the other hand, I think, well, everything for me is a way to live in cinema. You see, I'm watching even myself now, and I see the composition. I said, "Oh, it's not very good," but okay, I leave it like that. Or I don't know. This is and cinema is not only with images. Cinema can be with words. When you can see one word next to another, this is also the lesson of Eisenstein. You can see the words in a more cinematic way. Just a second, I bring you something. Sorry,
That was a
I'm
great,
reading.
great cinematic moment.
Yeah, exactly. I'm reading this book by Victor Klemperer, The Language of the Third Reich, and I'm always thinking that this is the book that could be better for script writers than the manual of script writing, because Klemperer, who was a philologist during the Third Reich, a Jew married with an Aryan woman, and that's why he was not deported. But he was very, very careful of how words were used by the Nazis and how words changed. And this attention to words, of course, you would say he's a philologist, but I really think it's exactly what a director should do with every element, even when he or she is doing the film, or all the time. It's a fascinating book because he
And
was.
how do you, sorry, how do you have a system of like you take notes every day or with all these observations or links or readings?
Everything. Yeah, I think it's important to. I have folders with everything. I mean, not everything. Of course, you have to make a selection at some point. But I have a folders with vernacular images, let's say, uh, from the internet, photographs, videos, paintings, whatever I can find, and I try to organize them in folders that I know for myself they are not organized, and with quotations and with references, with my ideas. I have, whenever I have an idea, I put it down, because I notice that you always say, "Oh, I will remember it," and you don't. Actually, you don't remember. I think when I look in these folders, even that now I know them, because sometimes when I do a film or I prepare something, I start to looking at them, and a few days I do only this. All of a sudden, I find there are things that I don't remember when I put them, and maybe it's 5 years ago or 4 years ago, and I said, "Oh my God, what is this? What's with this image? What is this film? What is it?" So yeah, so I try to organize my work in such a way, and I think this work of organizing yourself, although it's something that dispels the magic that art or cinema should have, I think is much more important than having ideas, because as I said, the ideas come from anything that you work, and the creation and analysis, if you want, they have to go hand in hand. You cannot just create. I mean, I'm always amazed. Even I'm doing the same. I'm going with the phone, either with my kids or I don't know myself on the street, and I'm taking photos. But I never, or very rarely, because then you have to work to copy them in your computer, start looking at them and see, this is good, this is not good, this may be. This we don't do. You just make the photo because this is easy, but then the work of analysis, exactly like Weissman said, the finding what's abstraction in what you saw, what you had in front of your camera. It's not, you have to work. So yeah, I try to work every day, 20, 30 minutes to organize the materials that I gathered the other day, or yeah. So
There's a question here from Marina Lajana, who's a filmmaker and writer. She says, I wanted to ask you, how do you know when a script or an idea is ready to be filmed? How do you get to that conclusion? Maybe you can answer in relation to do not
Mhm.
expect too much from the end of the world.
Yeah. This is a crucial question, and dear dear Marina, if I knew the answer to this, I would be so happy. Um, Actually, it happens like this. Yeah, as Andres said, maybe I explained with this film in mind, saying that, as I said, I needed to have a project to apply for the film center. So I made the story, but only the second part, the story of that shooting of, because that was from my experience. So that was quite easy to write it. I wrote it very fast as a script, because you need to have something organized in form of a script. Send it to the film center. It was rejected. Then a few months after that, I applied again and made the same thing, but a little bit bigger. And this time I got financing on the last place, but still we had the Romanian money. So it's quite, first of all, it's quite a traditional way of doing the film, if you want, looking for money, etc. And it's just one of the ways to do films. I'm not dogmatic on any of them. I just heard like a few years ago an interview with Mariano Chinas, whom I respect very much, and he seems to be that the only way to make films should be more or less like he is doing, like in this way. And I thought, well, yeah, well, maybe this is something that works for him. I wouldn't know how to make a film like that. Don't know if I would be able to. I need other things. So everybody finds what we can, how we can to do it. So then I got this money, but I knew in that moment that I don't want to make the film. So as Marina asks, and I felt it's not something that I want to make in this form. And now if the question is why, I think it's difficult because to answer, because um, rationally I felt that there's something. Maybe this is also I don't have a method and I don't have a style, but at least I know that there is something that I'm always interested, that at the level of the structure, or at the level of the storytelling or of the fiction, if you want, but let's say it's structure. Let's use the word structure, because I think it's a better word that covers everything. I always need, in order to feel the urge to make the film, that I have a structure which is, if not completely new, at least new for me, and at least new in some aspects, like to say, oh, maybe this kind of structure I haven't seen before. So that film at that moment didn't have this structure, but I knew. So then I started to work on it, uh, a bit forced, because I had like 2 months to have a new script in order to find co-producers. I knew I wanted to shoot next year. And this is something that of course you can judge it as you want, but it's also connected with many things, with the way you organize. You always have to think in advance, making films much more than you want to or like to. I don't like to think in advance. For instance, I don't like to know that normally in September 2025 I will start making a film in France if everything goes well. Well, I wrote a project for a French producer who asked me, and that makes it, kind of weird. I mean, I don't want to. It feels like your future is already bought in a certain way, but on the other hand, this is the only way you could do it, because then there seems to be, for a film like that, at least for a fiction film, maybe for an essay film is another. And I did essay films, and there's another organization, but well, I was in a situation that I knew that in 2 months I have to start looking for co-productions, and I knew that in 1 year from that moment I want to start filming. But I knew that the project won't be like that. So struggling, that's an interesting experience as well. I think maybe everybody had it. You struggle, then you look around, then I don't know, I look into my papers, I look into my things, and I was always thinking, but not writing in that moment. Like for 1 month, I didn't put, or even more, like 1.5 months, I didn't put one single word on paper. I was just going to my head and try to find ways, or looking into my papers, and I didn't find anything. And at some point, but it's only because of this effort and of this work, a small revelation appeared, because I felt that I found that I had another project about a woman driver, a woman being a driver, inspired somehow by this old Romanian film. And all of a sudden, I had the desire to connect the two stories, to make one film, not two. And then, of course, the way I did it, the way I structured it, is another story that we can go on later. But in that moment, when I put the two stories together, I knew that this is a structure that I want, that I like, and I knew that I'm gonna make this film. Now, of course, there were other changes, but in that moment, I knew I want to explore this structure, these stories. I didn't feel there's something. I mean, of course, I always know there's some limits. I mean, you have your personal limits, your professional limits, your talent limits, whatever. But I knew, oh, this is something I want to explore, good or bad.
So
I do.
you're saying that Angela was not there at all at the
At the
beginning.
beginning, no.
So somebody here, Maria Rinaldi, is asking exactly how you constructed this character of Angela, how this came about.
Okay, so I go on with this story then, because 2 years before writing this script, I watched this old Romanian film with a woman taxi driver, and I disliked it very much, but something remained there, and I said, wouldn't it be interesting to make a remake of that film? So this is what I had in my notes, and a few possibilities how to make a remake, etc., etc. So when I decided to make this film, I said, okay, but maybe I want to connect it with the story of this worker with the shooting, his shot. It doesn't make sense to have a taxi driver, or I didn't feel it have a lot of sense. And then also I remember a story which I always have with me, of a man, young boy, actually, who was 21 or 22 years old, who was working as a production assistant for a production company, and they had one shooting, and as I said, as it happens, and as you could see in the film, longer and longer and longer and longer, and he was, as a production assistant, he was carrying props or people or actors with the car. And at some point, he started to tell the production manager, look, I'm feeling very tired. I need to sleep. I cannot go on. I'm afraid I do an accident. And the production manager said, don't worry, drink a coffee, drink a Red Bull. It's just 2 more hours or 3 more hours. And this man died in a car crash. He hit a tree and died. And this is something that impressed me enormously. I was not an assistant anymore, I was a director, and I realized that I was working in the same situations, going, for instance, 300 kilometers from Bucharest, shooting 16 hours, and then get into the car, not only me, but the whole crew, and drive 300 kilometers back to Bucharest, where we live and most of the film people live. It's one city industry. And from that moment on, I refused any shooting day further away than 100 kilometers from Bucharest, not to have accommodation for the night for whole crew. Even for advertisements or for films. For films, it was not a problem because my production, my producer at that time, we had not worked together anymore. Ada Solomon was really responsible and mature about that. But for commercials, there was a situation where people say, well, sorry, we cannot take you because we cannot offer this accommodation. So I prefer to say, I don't come than to do it. So this story was something that really deeply shocked me and impressed me. So then at some point I said, maybe I should tell this story, but not to have a man, because the man was already in the second part, and maybe to switch and to have a woman. And then, yeah, this is how it started, this character. And I put there, of course, other stories from what I encountered or from what I found out, or from the research or from the imagination. And then I didn't kill the character, so to speak, like in reality, because I knew that there's going to be a second part of the film and it would become useless. But I want to feel all the time that the exhaustion and there is a death threat all the time, I think, above these characters. And then, of course, the question how to develop a character like that is also connected to the fact that I'm a man and the character is a woman. But from this point of view, I take the easy way. I always try to take the easiest ways. I think it's Rivette who said that let's let the difficult things to the pretentious people and embrace the easy things. So I'm basically constructing the character like me, like she was a man in a certain way. Not forcing myself to say, oh, she's the woman, so she should be this or that. No, she's exactly like it would be a man. And then, of course, the actress and the body of the actress transforms it into a woman character. So I think I think the character is, if such a thing exists. David Mamet says it doesn't exist, but let's say if it exists, it's like the meeting between the text or the story, if you want, and the actor or the body of the actor, of the actress. So basically I did one part of the character, meaning the text, and she's doing the other part. So it wasn't and I always try to model, if you want, consciously or not, the characters around the actors and not the other way around. So I just wanted, I knew Ilinka before, Ilinka Manolake, the actress. We worked together for smaller parts. I think she's a great actress, and yeah, I just wanted her to be not herself, because now there's another quote of Bresson who says that you don't have to act yourself, you don't have to act the character, you don't have to act nobody, in a way. And yeah, so I think, yeah, it's I understand this mysterious quote of Bresson, meaning that you have to be somewhere in the middle of all these things. So because I couldn't say it's exactly as Ilinka Manolaki is in her real life, it's not exactly as the character is written. She's somewhere in between all these things. Yeah.
So there's another question that is related to the reception of the film in Romania. If there was a special reaction to the film in Romania, it's one of the questions different from elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And if you
Yeah.
think about this previously.
Well, I think I don't know how Argentina is, because Argentina is, of course, a huge country and a big and huge culture. Uh, and yeah, I mean, big models behind and a different history. So, but Romania, is a small country, somewhere between Russia, Turkey, and Western Europe, Western world. We always and always split, if you want, ideologically or culturally, between people who felt closer to very traditional values coming from Russia, generally saying coming from Russia, like that, like Dostoevsky and things, in a certain way, and another part of the people who are always dreaming about West. And cinema, art cinema, if you want, or is always in the second category, in a way, because it's not it's a new art. It's the way cinema functions, apart from what is commercial cinema, let's say, which can be very, very local, is international. The how should I say, the canon is international, and a lot having to do with Western world, with America, Western Europe, or Japan, South America. I don't know. So it's not. It's not. It's always cinema creates a bit of tensions, and then judging by the two things, the topic and the form, the reactions can be stronger or less strong. Because in my other films, where I touched topics which are almost taboo in Romania, like the slavery of the Roma population, of participation of Romanian authorities and army in the extermination of the Jews in the Second World War, the backlash was huge. There was a lot of, or also for my previous film, Bad Luck Banging or Loony Porn, which speaks about sexuality and women's rights, etc. So this is always a part of the people who are acting angrily against the film, which is something, to be honest, that apart from the fact that at some point it's a cringe feeling, or it might make you afraid a little bit. Sometimes I receive death threats or these kind of things. But apart from that, it gives you a sense of fulfilling your duty, because all of a sudden it's interesting, because if everything would be, nobody would care about the films, then but the fact that they create sometimes such a national scandal, it shows that films are still important in a way. Even if the people who attack them say, I don't give a fuck about this film, I don't want to see it, nobody sees them. Well, nobody sees them, but there's such a big thing sometimes. And of course, in the case of the last film, that was much less. It's not a taboo topic, let's say. But because of the form, this is the other thing that creates a stir sometimes, of course, a little bit less, is because of the form, everybody was enraged. There are people saying, this is not a film. What is this stupid thing? Some people say he destroyed this great, nice film from the 80s. How dare he did that? How dare he use TikTok in a film? There was someone who saw the film in New York Film Festival, and he wrote me an email saying, you use TikTok images in cinema, fuck you forever, or something like that. So there was a lot of things against the film because of the form, and I think that's an important thing to create, because I think this is how things. Well, I'm not pretending myself to be in that position, but I think if everything stays the same, then people don't get used with other things. And of course, the first thing when it's something new, and I think this is true for me as well. I don't feel superior to other people when there is something even a little bit new, relatively new. Of course, there's nothing maybe new in an absolute way. There's always a reaction of rejection. The first thing is to reject it. I don't know. For me, it's the same. I mean, it happened all my life. I mean, the first time I opened the TV, like 25 years ago, and I saw a Romer film, I said, I don't want to see this thing. It looks like a telenovela, like a soap opera. You know, it felt like. So it took me a few years to get used to Romer's poetic and understand it. So yeah. So I think it's very good that people are provoked a little bit, and even if they reject it, maybe another film comes or maybe another literature work, and little by little we get used to new things, and that makes it, I think it's important for the quality of life, if you want, if I can speak in these terms, or although I know how difficult, how different is from a class to another class, or from a nation to another nation. But I really want to be able to enjoy all kinds of forms. It's like in music, you know, in music is much simple in a way. You can enjoy rock music, but you can enjoy pop music, and you can enjoy free jazz, and maybe you can enjoy John Cage or experimental music. And you don't see it as a, I mean, if you're not stupid, you don't see as a traitor from one music to another. So I think cinema and other arts could be the same. Yeah. So this was for the reception of the film.
Allows me. This is a question from me. Uh, I have the feeling, having seen quite a few of your films, that you're always trying to change. You're always trying to not do the same, and you're looking for something that you hadn't thought before. I don't know if you can talk a little bit about this, if you can. Maybe it's
Yeah,
impossible.
sure. No, it's a great question, and something that interests me very much, because it is what you're saying. It is not. I mean, it's not only a desire for a change, but as I said before, my belief that the form, and by the form I understand everything, starting with the structure, or even with the choice of the story you tell or the subject you take. Like for an essay film, you have subjects or themes. um, I think all these are have to go somehow together. When sometimes there's people saying, "Why don't you make a film about this topic, or this topic, or about this character?" And I always say, "Well, I don't know how to do it." Although more and more I try to be even open to these things, and to say, yeah, maybe I can accept. I try to accept more and more than when I was younger. You know, maybe it's a, I don't know. It's a way I don't want to. I'm afraid. I'm 47 years old, and I'm afraid that it's this difficult age from all points of view, but it's a difficult age also creatively, so to speak, because people sometimes become very stiff, and I feel it. It's very easy to become stiff, to become, and I try to punish myself a little bit, and to push myself a little bit, to try to accept things that I don't know how to do. And then if you struggle with that, it's much more exciting, and I think in the end the result could be better, even if it's not everything sometimes is good. But also this is on another question: why should all the films be good? I mean, of course we all want to make great films, but I think sometimes, if you look again at painters or writers, not everything they wrote is good. Not all Faulkner novels are great. Not every Picasso painting is great. I mean, some are really ridiculous when you look at them, but they are all part. Not all of Fassbinder movies, if you want, are great. Some people say, oh, if Fassbinder would have made only 5 films, his greatest films. But why? I think he needed to create all those. So in a certain way, I try to be less afraid about making a bad film, or a film which is not that good. Of course, in cinema is always a trick, because for financing, but yeah, apart from that, I'm interested in exploring things, let's say. And how do you explore? I think it's I don't know. It has to be at least some elements of unknown, or of things that you never did before. Of course, here can appear the questions that sometimes appear. Isn't that a way not to be honest to be a kind of a trickster that always want to try new tricks. And I think, yes, it can be like that, but what can I say? I prefer this risk than the risk of doing the same things again and again and again. And I wouldn't have a problem to do the same thing again and again and again, but I always feel that I don't have something else in that direction. So it's either that or nothing. That's the thing. Yeah.
Here's a question from going back to do not expect too much from my friend Dario Schwartzstein. It's in English. Thank you, Dario. There's a conceptual key of your film, I think. For me, is the idea that the apocalypse is already happening and it doesn't look like the biblical description. It is rather stupid, silly, self-inflicted, unnoticed. Involves themes such as technology, feminism, ecology, etc. There's a view of the present and the future, says Dario. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think the first thing I would discuss it here is the title, because the title is "Do not expect too much from the end of the world," and I think I already not here, but I said it in different times that it's a quotation actually, is an aphorism of Stanislav Jerzy Lec, who is a Polish aphorist. He died in the 60s, I think, and by accident I found the book here while I was preparing the project. And when I read that, I said, this is going to be the title, even if it's long and etc. Let's has very different aphorisms. I can tell you a few more. Like he says, "Is it a progress if a cannibal eats with a fork and knife?" You know, or something like there are people who make grammar errors even when they are silent. You know, so I really think he's a great aphorist, or things like not everybody who dies on the island of Saint Helena is Napoleon. You know, so I really think he has a way of using a paradox in his aphorism, and I like very much this paradox that also your friend who wrote us, Dario, noticed in his question, the fact that you can speak about apocalypse, so is the or end of the world, so there's something very big, very serious, if you want, but in the same time there's an irony towards it. So it's two directions in the same title, in the same aphorism. It's on one hand pessimistic and mocking the situation. And as the film, I think, had these two directions as well, I felt this title is much better than the title I had before, and I will say it again in a minute, which it was. But I think that the title is important because in the moment I realized that this would be the title, it helped me to organize the film better. And I think this is why titles are important. If you know that this will be the title, when you are in trouble or you cannot decide, you just need to remember the title, and then according to the title, the decision is easy to take in a certain way. Yes, and then sure, it's a bit it's these two attitudes. It's a feeling that we all have, or many of us have, especially in these years from us here close to Ukraine after the Russian invasion, and we really feel threatened. I mean, it's very close, and we never know how this madman Putin will go on. And so it's more than it was before anyway, but it's it's everything is a feeling of a possibility of a disaster that can happen anytime, and in another way, and I don't want to sound cynical, but and maybe it's also connected with the age, I feel less and less fear about that, and I feel less and less sadness. Years before, when I saw that not only me, I would die one day, but the world and everything that's so beautiful that people did from music or films or literature, everything will disappear at some point. I felt such a sadness, and now I don't do it anymore. Now I'm like Borges saying in that poem, that you build on sand, but you have to pretend you're building on stone, but we are building everything on sand. So in a way, it's not if you want, it's not a pessimism, but it's a little bit of acceptance and a feeling of joy, in a way, a feeling of relaxation, a feeling of liberty, of freedom. There's a lot of freedom to think that everything will end in a way. It's and not only our death, our physical existence, which for sure is going to happen, but everything we know. I mean, we know for sure. This is also another aphorism of Stanislav Bergilets. He said that the difference between an optimist and the pessimist is only concerning the date of the end of the world. Someone say in 1 million, that's the optimist, and the pessimist can say in 100 years, but the outcome is the same. We know it. So yeah, so I wanted to express that all this there together, all these two directions, if you want. Yeah.
Here's another question from Matayoshi, the photographer, who asks, how do the social media, um, social networks, whatever, influence the writing of the film, let's say? Is he also asking about how it is received and so on? But I
Yeah.
think interesting in the making of a film, if that's
Yes.
the case.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that I think I think there's a mistake in the question, if you want, mistake. Because of course, the way you put the question, then you have a certain answer, and one of the things that usually questions do is to try to limit the answer. Because when you say how is the social network influence this or that, and if I would start to answer that, I would think that it's not going to be a good answer, because the social networks, like everything else, is part of a continuum of things, not only in themselves but also in if you want, in everything else. So life in reality is a continuum, is a continuous process. So yeah, then you have to how should I say, to interact with things, and all these interactions become part of what you do, I think, especially now getting back to what we discussed before, like how you see, how you look at things, how you can put everything together. Like Eisenstein said, if I share my screen now and get on my Facebook, just for the sake of it, uh, you will see that there's a lot of things that well, there's a news about Andrew Tate, and you can pay attention or not, and then which is the next thing, there's something about Festival de Cannes Film Festival. So even here you have a cinema montage, with this thing and the Cannes Film Festival, you can put it together. So somebody asked, what comedy series have you seen lately and can you recommend? And then there's something about you see, it's funny to look at things like this, like trying to see what happens there, what you have, there's always something, it's and of course you can find So there's a really bad humor. He's asking the wife, how long does a donkey, a burro, lives? And she says, why do you ask? Are you feeling bad or something? So you see, you see all kinds of things, and then it depends what you do with them. How you There's something about an interesting book about secret service in Romania, so you can find this and maybe find some information about it. There's all these kind of things. So it's true that everything can be used in one way or another for finding information, for finding entertainment. But I really think I always try is to try and see everything here is AI art universe. It's something made with AI. It's your football player, right? Is uh,
Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo together.
yeah,
Never.
yeah. So yeah, you can see that and you say, okay, I watched the film already. You see, it's all the time you find things. A quote from Hannah Arendt: "The mass society doesn't want culture but entertainment." Well, it's interesting to just think about. You see, it's so in this way, I try to feed myself with everything that I can find.
Because
Speaking of
I
speaking,
find, sorry, I
no, just,
find,
just just let me this anecdote. I think it's funny that Philip Roth speaks about because I saw this Hannah Arendt there about she was a great philosopher, political thinker, and in somewhere in the 60s or 70s, she went to see, because everybody told her it's the greatest film. She went to see Cries and Whispers by Ingmar Bergman. And Philip Roth remembers that they were at a table and Hannah Arendt came, and someone asked her, so Miss Arendt, what do you think about Cries and Whispers? And she lit a cigarette and said, Scandinavian kitsch. That's all. Scandinavian kitsch from Scandinavia. That's what Hannah Arendt thought about this masterpiece. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you.
no, I forgot what I was going to say. But it's, what was I going to say? I will remember at some point.
We spoke
Here
about
is
social
one
network.
question. Oh, what? No, it's just a feeling I had. Now I remember. Actually, I saw Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World at the London Film Festival, where
Uh-uh.
I happened to be there, and I really felt like this was exactly like you just showed, like going on Twitter. I
Mhm.
felt I've never seen this in a film. The feeling that this film was shot last night,
Mm.
because there's the sort of Uberization of work,
Mhm.
the aggressiveness of the street, which it seems very Argentinian to
Yeah,
us.
yeah. Uh,
And at the same time, there's this, yeah, work kind of accident and trying to make everything look good,
mhm.
I mean, all of this seems very much of today. And maybe the role of this 1986 movie has something to do with that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or how to make a film seem like it's, fresh off the page in a way.
Mm. Well, you know how I think there's always two things about this, because to be modern, if you want, it's first of all, if it happens, it happens. You cannot really control it that much. But I think to be modern is always involves a little bit making also a step back, because if you look at the film with this eye, you will see that actually it's, despite the fact that it seems quite or for some people, like you said, Andres, it seems like a social media film or whatever. Actually, the structure of it and the stylistic of it is many times extremely primitive. I shot mostly only in fixed shots. I shot in celluloid, in black and white, 16 millimeter. In was one part of the film. The bobitsa, these filters are so primitive. It's like Méliès in a way. Uh, you see, and the montage is very, very roughly done, and even the slow motion of the 1981 film is not 86, a little bit older, is made very, very handmade, so to speak. It's so all the techniques are
Yeah,
actually
the
very old.
credits are amazing as well.
Credits are so I think we with cinema, one of the things that we always fall into the trap is to think that what was before is and especially young filmmakers do this mistake, in my opinion is a mistake. They consider that what was before is like gone and not good anymore. And on the contrary, I believe that that if you make a step back, then you can make a step forward in a certain ways. You see, if you but of course you have to know how to do it, and for that I really think that knowledge, and I don't have such a good knowledge, but I do my best in all kinds of cinema at least, is important, because I'm interested in old cinema, I'm interested in new cinema, I'm interested in digital cinema, in video art, I'm interested in social networks, I'm interested in everything. Everything is interesting for me, and then if you see cinema like that, I think you feel more close, more connected to everything, and you feel that you can use everything and you can reflect about everything, and sometimes that's good, sometimes yeah, some this is the where it comes from, I guess. That's one thing. And the second, I think, is the fact that I think the people who are making films are the first one that have to accept that cinema is in crisis for real, a real crisis from all points of view, from the points of view of creation, if you want, from the points of view of distribution, from the points of how it is threatened all the time by other technology, by AI, or by, I don't know. It's always something that makes cinema in crisis. Maybe other arts the same, but actually because they find, for instance, theater, I don't think theater is in the same crisis, because theater is, of course, has to adapt, but it's always a specific audience for theater, and is there, and you have live actors, and so theater doesn't have a crisis like we have. So my idea was, and now if you read interviews with big filmmakers or older filmmakers, I don't know, there's always a kind of feeling of everybody's complaining. Everybody cries about cinema is gone. You can see Pedro Costa saying that. You can see Richard Linklater saying, "Oh, it was so great in the 90s when we were doing independent films and showing this and that." Of course, Richard Linklater speaks how it was in United States, because in Romania in the 90s it was impossible to see their films. So for me, the crisis was then, not now. No. And then you see people like, I don't know, everybody's complaining. Scorsese saying, "Oh, these superhero movies are not movies," or whatever. So I think that's, even if it's true, then you can say, okay, so what? I mean, yeah, I mean, should we just stay and cry about the death of cinema, or because of the crisis is in, or maybe we should accept the crisis and try to use it in a creative way, and to use it as a starting point. I don't know, instead of saying, "Oh, but social media is destroying cinema, let's see how," because cinema is such a flexible medium. Cinema is really something that you can have everything into. Cinema is accepting everything. Cinema is accepting poetry. Cinema is accepting photography, photographs, paintings, videos. Is accepting everything. You just have to treat it cinematically. Then you cannot have in a photograph. You cannot put a poem, but or very difficultly. But you can put a poem and a photograph in a film, and it still remains a film. So it's so I really try to see that in the new age of images we are into, it's maybe the greatest time for cinema. It's the greatest time because it's this crisis, and but in the same time you have images, you have cinema everywhere. You just open the window and you see a film. Well, maybe it's not a Martin Scorsese film, but it's there. So instead of saying, "Oh, it shouldn't be like this," yeah, maybe we should fight it with their weapons, so to speak.
Here's another question from Dario. How do you do being interested in almost everything, not to get lost in your own curiosity as in a labyrinth?
Well, first of all, I do get lost. I do get lost, but that's one thing. And second is that I'm frustrated because I don't have time and I work too much and I'm very shallow and superficial in a way. Well, if you want, the only way I found to not get completely lost is that when I discover a line of thought or a line of research or of a project or something, to make that a principal thing for a while at least, and the other thing I don't focus on them. I let them. For instance, in the last 2 years, the only thing I researched properly was John Cage, his music, his art, and his writings. He wrote maybe like 20 books altogether with interviews, books, etc. And I think John Cage, that probably everybody knows as a composer, I really think he's a tremendous thinker about arts, which we can apply to cinema. And because he was the kind of, I think there are two kind of artists altogether, if you want, the ones who close the way and the ones who open it. And John Cage belongs to the second part, second group. And I always needed to get close to people who are opening the ways, because I don't have big confidence in myself. And when John Cage said, his story that he wanted to study, he studied composing with Schoenberg. And after a few years, Schoenberg told him, look, you will never be a composer. And John Cage said, why? Because Schoenberg said you don't have an ear for harmony. And you cannot be a composer if you don't hear the harmony. And Cage says, yes, this is true. So Schoenberg said, then you shouldn't do that, because if you start to compose, you will hit the head with all the walls. And John Cage said, then I will dedicate my life in hitting my head to these walls.
Excellent.
When I read something like that, it feels very encouraging. Even at my age, I need this. I need that to someone says, even if maybe I'm not the greatest dramaturg or script writer or director, when I see the great films, I feel nobody. But then I remember somebody like John Cage, and I said, oh my God, but there's a place for me, because John Cage said, well, you can do it even if you just bang your head against the wall, so to speak. So this is why, for instance, I didn't get lost, because when I find something or someone that can be a model or something very interesting, then I really need to know everything. So I studied properly. I bought all the books, or I downloaded them illegally. I listened to all the music or downloaded it illegally. I watched all the interviews. Like for 2 years, I really studied John Cage, and and everything else was secondary, let's say. So this is the only way I discover not to get lost, and yeah.
Speaking of getting lost, we're coming to the end. Maybe you had some stuff that you wanted to show us. Maybe we can end with that. Remember?
Well, yeah, I didn't know. I was thinking, judging by the questions, that maybe I can show how, for instance, looked the project. I mean, I have a. Do you see my screen, right?
Yes.
Because well, there's some things that remained. For instance, I had this shot, and this is a test of it, and I tell you why it's like that. Where this is cut, and it's because so it's always I keep here all kinds of things that I use maybe because I caught that name because that a Romanian name, and actually the actor was a Hungarian ethnic, and because the Ceausescu censorship didn't like Hungarians because of historical problem towards the ownership of Transylvania, forced him to change the name. But I kept that. I kept. I decided to keep that. And then in this folder, which is called a practice, a case from practice, it's I really keep everything. Here's the old film, and sometimes when I'm lost, I'm keeping and looking at the things that I gather. For instance, this I didn't use it in the film, but it was there to know about it. It said that a church, episcopi from Hush, made a contest, which is the most beautiful graveyard. So I had these things with the graveyard, so I had this thing, or I have this other things with the test.
O să vă cânt ceva super mega șmecher de dedicație de 1 martie pentru toate femeile. Ia, haide aici. Davai la dângaz, davai la dângaz, davai la dângaz.
So you see all these kind of things, that the test that I'm doing, or I don't know. All this I use because I thought it's interesting also as a guidance somehow. This caricature, because you can see the reality, and then when you see the reflection, I think it's a good caricature, that it looks like someone is hitting with a knife someone, but actually it's the opposite. Yeah, so it's all kind of things that for instance, this I was in a city and I saw these cars. I didn't know what it is, but I really made a photo to investigate, and then I organized a scene around it. Then I have here the letter to Nina Hoss, because of course she's a famous star, and I didn't know how to convince her to act in my film in a smaller part. So I wrote this 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 letter to her. It doesn't matter, but it's also everything. I try to do everything not only important, but to, like Eisenstein said, to really consider it a kind of cinema. Here, this was an image that I wanted to use. In the end, I didn't. It's a scene that we couldn't do for oh, there's some music. I made this thing because I wanted to use this music. In the end, I didn't do it. That's a poem which was supposed to be a kind of motto, which is called "What Work Is" by Philip Levine, and a friend of mine who's a poet translated for me. I didn't use it. So you see how many things there are that I don't use in the end. I don't remember what this is, like visual. Yeah, I did some visual reference for the black and white, for my DOP. a lot of things, like from my research, the accidents at work in EU, and you can see Romania on top, right? The biggest. Second one, Bulgaria, then Austria, and usually here in these countries is also Romanian workers or East European workers. So you see, I really try to capture everything, to keep everything. So in this way, I know I can use it. This is someone, a mayor from Suceava, who won a motorcycle in a festival which was financed by his mayor office. So basically, the mayor won at the contest that he organized a motorbike, a motorcycle. So all kinds of things that can speak. This is something from the shooting of the old film. This is the director of the old film, Lucian Bratu. I don't know, all kinds of things. This is a test I did for the film stock. Yeah, this is the script. I don't remember how it was. In the end, I had to put it in. Here is put something with about David Hemming's death, and yeah, I had to write it like that for the film center. So usually I have it. Yeah, this is the proposal I did for Uwe Boll, and here you can see that I let him to improvise. You know, I only know that she will put the question. What question? But in the end, we didn't do that. But it was just a way to think, you know, which is the film you love the most from what you have done and why? This question, we didn't do it in the end. So you can see there's a lot of these things that you can consider them trivial or not very important. This is a test I did with the lens, just to check how the lens should be. And I drew the barrier because the barrier was not there. And also this, you know, this shot, I think this is interesting, and maybe I stop with this. This is an interesting image, I think. I'm really happy I found it because basically you have here, speaking of an idea that I found in Rivet. Rivet says that every film and every image should be like an essay, not only a storytelling, but an essayistic thing. So basically here, I really think that this photo in itself and the information in it are like a small essay. Now, I don't care if it's obvious or not. I think it was enough for me to decide to do it in this way, because you have this old factories, that's from the 30s, right? That's from the 30s, and then it became, it was nationalized by communists. But it was that's from that time, from Romania before communism. Then you have a building from communist times, but a more better one and newly restored. Then here you have a kind of Art Nouveau riche villas which are everywhere, and here you have a bunker, a kind of ridiculous bunker which somehow, I think, during the Cold War, in some factories, apparently, is the first one I saw in my life. They built these bunkers because they said, well, we have to have possibility to hide if atomic bomb starts, you know. And I thought, given the new war, that it's a perfect. I mean, all the montage of these elements together, and here you have the dog's house, which actually we moved it here to be more visible. All this transforms this setup for me in an important essayistic element. So it's the set is not only a background, but is something that expresses the whole tensions of the society. So as I said, it doesn't matter if people see it or not. I know that it centered my story in a good way. Yeah.
Speaking of this scene, there's many questions, but we maybe can answer one, which is the last one by Leandro Koch, a filmmaker,
Yeah.
who asks, I wanted to ask you what the process of rehearsing and preparing with the actors for the incredible final sequence of the film was like in order to achieve those performances.
Yeah, that's I think the question is well typical, but I think the answer is I hope it will be interesting because something happened. Basically two things. First of all, I really think that scene is bad, or I thought like that. I thought it's a very bad scene because, and I can tell you why it's bad, because actually it's in between of many things, and not all of them properly done. First of all, it's like a mockumentary. It's like the camera is the camera of the people who are doing the commercial. So it's another kind of it's telling the story through their camera in a way, but actually it's or through their video assist more, because that camera can be stopped or something, but ours doesn't stop. Then it's a question of time, because it's like a real, I mean, there is a cut because I wanted to have a cut, not because it was needed, but otherwise it's like a real time scene. But narratively speaking, that this is not real time, because a scene like that, if it would be for real, it will take hours. It wouldn't be 40 minutes. So then it's realistical, but also very staged. Also the set or the location, as we spoke before, is how should I say it, is realistic. It's just the courtyard of a factory, but all these elements around are become very symbolical, as I tried to show you before. So everything it's one direction and again and against. And I was very much pissed off by this scene because I never knew how to do it. But now I really think that it's interesting that it contains all this. It's not stable. It's a scene that if you really take a look at it from this point of view, I mean, if you really analyze it, you discover that it's full of contradictions. And then one of the other contradictions was that before doing it, I really wanted to be, like a 40-minute scene with a lot of movement and with a lot of virtuosity, if you want, like a Jean Renoir scene, even to move the camera from time to time or whatever. And I rehearsed the texts with the actors and worked on them, worked on the text, but I didn't do the staging. So I had, for this shooting, I had 2 days of rehearsing, and I was supposed to have 3 days of shooting. So 2 days rehearsing plus 3 days of shooting, so 5 days altogether. And in the first day of rehearsing, I rehearsed for a few hours, doing a lot of movement and a lot of that. And I was almost exhausted after 3 hours of work, and it looked terrible. It was not good I mean, it was ridiculous. People coming into the shot, getting out, saying the line, coming back. Everything was like a bad, cheap imitation of Jean Renoir. So then the next day I came, and all the evening I thought, and I said, look, the truth is I'm not able to do it good in this way. So what do I do? Because I really don't know. I mean, you feel your limits. All of a sudden you have 20 actors and you say, oh, with 20 actors I will do something amazing. And then you start putting them, and when you look at what you're doing and say, oh my God, it's not amazing at all. It's just shit. And so I said, no. And I think one of the principle which always works is that when something doesn't work in one way, go in the opposite direction. So I said, instead of making a very complicated choreography, I will make the most simple choreography. I will just put this family in front of the camera, and I will keep most of the crew of those 20 people that I wanted to put them around behind camera. So next day in the morning, we had the rehearsals. I told them, look, guys and ladies, it's going to be much easy because you will stay behind camera. You can even read the text. No need to learn them by heart. And they were very, very pissed off because they said, what do you mean? I don't want to stay behind camera. But I said, well, it's the only way I can do it. So no question about it. So I started to direct it. Still, it was too complicated. I simplify more and more and more. I still feel it could be even more simplified if you want, but I didn't know how to. So then I rehearsed it, and then it became really very easy to do, because it wasn't easy in itself, but because I started with something so complicated, then all of a sudden this felt manageable. And yeah, and then the producer Ada said, but Radu, you asked some of the most expensive actors for this scene and we don't see them. Do you think it's normal that I pay them a lot and we don't see them? So, and actually for the 3 days of shooting, actually I shot only one day. So at the end of the first day, I was done, and I knew that next day in the morning could be rain, so we just went there, and it was a little bit of rain, and we shot it also in the rain. So instead of 4 days of shooting, I think we just have 2 hours. You see, so yeah.
This is it's very funny. There's one question by Daniel Rosenfeld, a great filmmaker and friend, who asks a very kind of nitty-gritty question: how many days of shooting? How many days of editing? Do you
Yeah.
remember?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for the shooting, I remember precisely because it was supposed to be altogether something like 25 days. And because of this, I made it in 21, I think, or 22. I never had I never had a lot of shooting days. And to be honest, I would have liked to, but that's always a question because uh, I don't know if I need more. It's always tricky because, for instance, if you have more days of shooting, you try different things, but in the same time, you can lose a certain focus. And a certain tension that maybe I needed because this is how I grew up. I worked as assistant in all the really difficult shooting, and then I worked in commercials and television, and in commercials you cannot, I mean, when you say, okay, I take the responsibility, I do this commercial in 1 day of shooting, of course, if something is wrong because of production, then you can say it's not my fault and you can stop it. But otherwise, you really have to make it in what you said. The same with television. I did a telenovela at some point, and you really had to shoot like 25 minutes of film a day, and you just couldn't say today I'm not finished. They say, oh, what do you? How come you have to shoot it? So yeah, maybe that's a trap. I agree with that, but in the same time, for me, it's also helpful. I always had, because of the budget, I never had was able to have big number of shooting days. So here it was like 21 altogether. And regarding the editing, now here is a bit more difficult to answer because I edit with someone, with Catalin Cristutiu. I need a kind of but I am at the editing, and the decision of the cuts are mine. But of course, in some cases we discuss, and he's anyway much faster than I am, so I need someone to edit with me. And I think we edited the film in 1 month altogether, I guess, even less maybe. But it was a longer cut. It was something like now it's 2 hours 43. I think it was 3 hours and 10 minutes or something like that. And then I let it for a while, and I think that's a great thing if you can afford to do it. The longer you leave it and you get back to it, the better it is. If you can leave it 6 months, then it's going to be a much better film. But well, I didn't have the possibility because I had the programming. This is how when you do co-productions, in January in February, sorry, I knew I'm scheduled to do the sound mix in Luxembourg. And yeah, I couldn't. It was again a situation I couldn't say to them because they reserved the studio, they paid the studio. I just couldn't tell them I'm not ready with editing. So I had to finish the film in a certain at the 1st of December. It had to be finished to work on the editing. But one thing on the sound editing, one thing I always try to do with films, not always have the possibility or the time, but I really think is something important, is not to consider the film, the picture log without doing the sound. Because after you do the sound, you can discover that the scene which seemed too short, all of a sudden, or too long, all of a sudden is too short. Or something that feel too short now seems too long, or that you need something here or something there, or unless you have the whole sound in place, you cannot decide. So I always tell the production and everybody that after the sound editing, I will get back 1 or 2 days in the editing again. And so this is what I did, I think once or twice. Sometimes I even made longer the archive images, which was a bit difficult because you have to send it to the archive. They had to scan it for you, send it back, put it. So it was a difficult process, but I did it because you really cannot find a rhythm, even a rhythm which I tried to be not a good rhythm, so to speak. So I let many things on chance in a way, but others not. So it was a mix. So yeah. So then the sound mix was 2 or 3 weeks in Luxembourg, and I'm not happy with it. And I tell you why, because I worked with 2 very good Mexican sound mixers, which work also in Europe. Very good. They have an Oscar for a film called The Sound of Metal, and they're really professional. And I always told them, look, I want the film to be more rough in the sound mix. And they said, yeah. But actually, if you ask them to make 1 millimeter more or less, they would say, oh, are you sure? It's such a, because they are really serious. And I would always say, no, don't worry, go higher, go slower, go. But in the end, I'm not happy. I mean, I'm happy with them and I love them, but I think we could have been much more inventive with the sound mix, but I could not. So it was 3 weeks of sound mix altogether, and one day of actually no, it was 1 day of preparation of the color correction, and we did the whole color correction of the film in 1 day. So it was
Wow.
yeah.
So just to end, finally, I would maybe want to ask, so people have fresh news about Radu Jude, what you are working on, or what you did after this film. Can you tell
Oh,
us?
yeah, sure. After this, actually, in the same time, actually, I was editing a film which I'm quite proud is made with a Romanian philosopher and film theorist, Cristian Ferenc Flatz, of German ethnicity. And is a film called 8 Postcards from Utopia, and is a film made only with advertising images from the 90s and early 2000s, because Romania didn't have advertising in communist times, or something very, very little. And it was an explosion. And I think we thought it was interesting. It was interesting to see, to treat this advertisement as how should I call them, as documents, And speaking of that, speaking of social networks, there was I give another small share screen. I show you there is one guy. We found him on Facebook. His name is let me see, Kiriak. He's completely uh, crazy in a way, because he's like a like a private archivist, you know, and he's always finding things, you see, like old images in garbage dumps. Look, like he just found this old wedding VHS or whatever, and him was you know, even so he's really, he has already a system. He's completely obsessed uh, with finding images of all kinds, and he finds them. I don't know what he, how, I mean, I know it's a really complicated way of finding them, of archiving them, and he had a lot of commercials from on VHS tapes like that, you know, and he put them Bruce Lee's son, you know, all kinds of things, photographs, you know, he's finding really a lot. So if you really want images from Romania, like unknown images, he's the guy to contact, you see. And he helped us. I mean, half of the images came from him. And then we edited the film, like treating it in 8 chapters, like it would be documents, which they are in a way. Like they are the most fictitious images, of course, but they are exactly the documents of the desires and of the ideals, you know, of the society at that time, in a way. And another film, which is an homage to Andy Warhol. It's also a found footage film. So, and now I'm preparing in 10 days, and normally I start shooting a Dracula movie, sort of. Yeah, so I really try, as I said.
You're Romanian.
Yeah, I said, but this is started exactly because someone didn't want my previous project, and I told, well, producer, and I told him, but you know, I have a Dracula project as well, which I didn't. But he said, oh, a Dracula project, I'm interested. And then I said it to another one. We were in a market. And since everybody seemed interested, I said, well, I'm going to do something around. And then it wasn't easy to find a way. And because you have to find, I wanted to find something. I realized I don't care about this theme, vampires and shit. I don't care about it. I find it completely idiotic. But then I found a way. Now I'm very pleased how I do the film, how I want to do it. Yeah.
So we look forward very much to seeing your Dracula.
Let me answer another. There's Fernando Caruso saying some years ago there was a lot of enthusiasm in Argentina about Romanian cinema. There were the films by Puiu Mungiu, Muntean Porumboiu, etc. Even though they had their own particularities, all seemed to be familiar between each other somehow. After watching I Don't Care If We Go Down in History as Barbarians, a previous film of mine, I felt that this was completely different. Now, while that Romanian cinema spark seems to be vanished, you keep shooting films and separating each more from the core of that Romanian cinema that appeared 15 years ago. Do you feel different from your Romanian colleagues in this way? And did you explicitly try to separate in aesthetical terms from them? Yeah, I think it's a good question, and not because I want to say yes, I want to be different, and because it's not like that necessarily. But as I said, I'm interested in form and finding new forms for what I do, or good forms. And when I started to make films connected with the history of Romania, I felt that I need to find other ways, because the history, the representation of history in cinema, and not only in cinema, but I speak about cinema now, puts very difficult questions, very new question, it's really difficult. It's I mean, difficult conceptually. Of course you can do it like Hollywood, you do everything real, like it's realistic, but I think that's a problem. I think that's a problem, because of course you don't have access to the past. Cinema is recording what's happened at the moment of the recording. So from all this, I needed to find other ways. And little by little, some people say, oh, but they are different from the other filmmakers. And I think, yeah, they might be different. I don't know how much, because of this necessity. of the necessity of finding, of exploring the ways, and also maybe because, and that proved to be helpful. Speaking of like John Cage before, I mean, they were most of them older than me by 5 or 10 years or even more, and they were so successful from the beginning, and that I think it's sometimes dangerous if someone is hugely successful with his or her first or second movie, and I was not that successful, and that liberated me in a way, because I didn't feel I'm in a competition with them. I felt they are so high above me, and I still feel this way, that I can I didn't feel in a competition anymore with anybody from this group, because they were, I mean, it's like, okay, I give up, I lost my I lost the race, if you want, from the beginning, from before even starting it. So then, paradoxically, which this could seem like, oh, you lack ambition or whatever, but on the contrary, it felt very, very liberating in many ways. And this is also my desire to make more films than they do, because I don't want to think, and I think many of them think with good results, of course, strive for masterpiece. They say, I prefer to stay 5 years and make a great film. But for me, I don't care about making films which are great or not. What I care about is to make films where there is a little bit of cinema thinking and of cinema expression. And if they are good or not, well, of course, I want them to be good. But well, how we define it, that's a tricky thing. But anyway, this is not the main concern. I'm not concerned to make good films. It's not the first thing. I want to express something, or to explore something, and then, well, I try to stabilize the project as much as I can. But I'm not obsessed about quality. I'm more interested in what's new there, what is to explore, what's to find, and not being good. And I think that's maybe also, but that's another question. Why in cinema school there is this obsession with making good things? Not in you. I mean, Andres told me that you make one film a week, and I think that's a much more healthy approach, because I see students that they say, no, I want to wait 6 months to have a proper good script and to make a properly good film, and it doesn't happen. Or even if it happens, it's something that they say, oh, now I made this good film, then I don't do anything for next 1 year, or I don't know. And I said, why? Now you make one every week. No, this is not possible. So I think I'm not saying that everybody should make a film every week. If you want to make a film every 10 years, make a film every 10 years. There's no problem for that. But there's always up and downs, because what happens is that you cannot make the 16 chapel like Michelangelo did in 1 week. You need the 10 years for that. But in the same time, when you look at, let's say, like Paul Klee paintings, you cannot make a Paul Klee painting in 10 years. You need to make it in 20 minutes or in 2 hours. So I think the idea is to know, to adjust yourself and your work and your intensity and your time to what you're doing. So and to understand in a certain way, or to feel it. It's an intuitive thing to understand and say, okay, this project will take me a while, so I will work on it longer. While this project, maybe it's easy not to spend so much time, but just to make it. Sometimes you can be wrong, but well, this is how you learn, I think.
And with those words, I think we can end. It's almost 12 o'clock here, and I just want to thank you, Radu, for really generous and transparent explanation of what you're doing and how you go about it. And I hope that that's inspiring for everybody here listening.
Well, it's inspiring for me anyway, because I think it's whenever you make a kind of, and I really try to make it honest, meaning by that I really I do it like I speaking to myself, like I would be myself in the audience, and this is helpful for me, very helpful actually. So even if I don't see you, it's like a collective psychoanalyst, you know, like
Fantastic.
100 or 50 Dr. Freuds from Argentina and South
We are all deeply psychoanalyzed, as you know.
Yeah, I know.
So,
Lacan.
gracias, everybody. Gracias a todos por participar, por sus preguntas, interés. Eso, muchas gracias. Thank you, Radu.
Muchas gracias.